pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for February 27th, 2018. We are back after our Olympic hiatus, we could say. We weren't gone necessarily anywhere. We're just talking Olympics.
We're talking a lot of Olympics. They're over then? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they are over. And so we're not going to necessarily try to catch you up on the last few weeks of the world of soccer. But Duane wanted me to say that Manchester City won the League Cup. All right, it's over. It's done. It's said.
All right. Yes, they did in a decisive way. It was a lot of fun. So happy to have that first trophy under the belt, Pep's first trophy. We don't need to belabor it. We'll move forward rather than back. Of course, there's a Champions League game of a different kind tonight here in Toronto. So lots to look forward to. MLS season starts on the weekend. Insane.
That's insane, eh? Because once every 2 years, well, every 4 years, because it's the Winter Olympics just before the MLS season. And it makes for the last month of the MLS season to go by quite quickly. For us, at least. And now we're 1 week away from the beginning of the season. There's CCL games tonight, the second leg of the round of 8. It's not the quarterfinal, is it already? No.
Round 16. Round 16.
Yeah, round 16, exactly. To get a ticket to the quarterfinals, let's talk about a bit of CCL. Let's go to Toronto tonight, the second leg. Toronto's already up 2-0 against Colorado, 2 goals last week at Dick's Sporting Goods Stadium. Is there any chance Colorado can do anything tonight?
There's always a chance, obviously, but I do think that when you look at the fact that they're 2 goals down, the Rapids I'm talking about, obviously, and, you know, they have some important stuff ahead of themselves. The problem with the Rapids, and it was really evident last week, is they don't really have – they create like one chance a game. Right? And if they don't score that one chance, even look the season that they were successful, which qualified in the Champions League, they were winning every game 1-0. So if they don't score early and to be down 2 that BMO, I almost anticipate, I haven't seen the lineups yet, but I anticipate that they're almost going to probably mail it in a little bit tonight. They've looked out a little bit because it's gorgeous in Toronto. I don't know what the weather is in Montreal. But
yeah, it's pretty gorgeous today. I just can't really hear you, Duane. It's a bit muffled, so just make sure you're close to the microphone because we can't really hear you. Okay, that's better. What's really impressive for me is 2-0 and the way they approached the first leg. And we didn't talk about this. We weren't necessarily on the air. But the last 10 days of the training camp for TFC before the first game in the CCL, just a bit before, was in Mexico City. In altitude. And yes, it was in preparation for maybe the next round against maybe Tigres or another Mexican team. But that training stint in altitude in Mexico City really showed against Colorado on the road, where late in the game they were able to get the advantage in Colorado's home, where usually it should be the opposite. It should be Colorado late in that game having the body accustomed to altitude. Mile high, right? Denver, it's a mile high city. You kind of have that body blood, the red blood cells count is higher, and you can late in the game be able to have more energy and more oxygen in your muscle to run a little faster. Well, Toronto had that, and not Colorado. So now back in Toronto, it's going to be beautiful. It won't be that cold for late February. It's already 2 goals up. Is that advantage enough to mail it in, like you mentioned, Duane, or to maybe put not an A lineup, but maybe a B lineup?
Yeah, it could. Look, 1 goal is going to end this tie. As I said, Colorado just has no ability to score multiple goals. That just doesn't seem likely. To even score 2 in a game is a long stretch for them. But I think certainly Toronto's got to feel good about their chances tonight. They're the defending MLS Cup champions, and they've improved. They've added players in the offseason. The question is whether or not they can, gel. And certainly that camp in Mexico probably helped them a great deal with that. So hey, it could be a good crowd tonight. I think a lot of people were waiting to see the weather. especially more casual fans. And now that the weather is nice, it's like you want to be outside. That I suspect you'll probably see. I don't think it's going to be a sellout, but I suspect that they might have about 20,000 or so tonight, which would be a decent crowd for the end of February. We have one more day left in February. We're playing it one day to the end of February. That's I guess once your schedule. Maybe that's the dream's coming true.
Maybe the dream is coming true. But we do have better weather the last week, at least here in Montreal. It's been a lot more mild than what we're accustomed to late February. Usually, for North American listeners that are not from this part of the world, usually late February, at least in my neck of the woods, Montreal, it's still the deep freeze. It's still usually minus 10 to 20 in the Celsius, which now it's not the case. It's quite mild. It's been 3-4 degrees. Same in Toronto, so you will have decent playing weather. The pitch won't be a problem with technology that's been installed in Toronto over the last few years, and how they are able to make the grass grow even in terrible conditions with the money invested in the lamps and the system to the actual lighting system for the pitch. So that won't be a factor tonight. So that'll be interesting. And there's other few games, Duane, that I've taken a look at and are quite interesting. Tigres Iridiano. It's the second leg. Iridiano, a team from Costa Rica. Tigres from Mexico, obviously. And Tigres from the region of Monterrey. Tigres is 2-2 against Iridiano. And Duane, in the first leg, Tigres had the advantage on the road 2-0. And they let Iridiano come back. Yes, Tigres has a huge advantage heading into tonight's game with 2 goals on the road, 2 away goals. But what if Iridiano scores 1? What if? It's always a possibility, but Tigres, a powerhouse in this competition.
Yeah, certainly. That's the expectation, is they'll finish the job there. The Mexican teams traditionally kind of lay up the first leg on the road. They're happy with the 2 away goals. We've seen it here, in the past with TFC, back when TFC was not very good and they were in the Champions League because of winning the Canadian Championship. They would often they tied Santos Laguna at home at BMO Field, and it was like the best game TFC had played that year, and Santos was like, good, we got the draw. I remember talking to Herculez Gomez about that after, and he said that exact same thing, that there's this lacks this sort of killer mentality that he was surprised at how excited TFC was by that draw, and I sort of said to him at the time, well, TFC's pretty bad, so that's why they're excited. But yeah, they would have to get an early goal tonight, but Tigres has got to be the favorite on that one for sure.
The other games as well, 2 other Mexican clubs, actually 3 other Mexican clubs in action today and tomorrow. Tonight again, Club Tijuana versus Moraga. Don't know a lot about Moraga. I don't know if anyone actually does, but Tijuana, club from Liga MX, 1-0 on aggregate so far tonight. That's at 10 p.m. And you have Chivas Guadalajara against Cibao as well. It's 2-0 on aggregate for Guadalajara so far, and that's at 8 p.m. tomorrow. Tomorrow as well, FC Dallas versus Toro. Isn't it just me who thinks that matchup is ironic? Dallas with a Toro on their logo playing FC Toro. And so far, FC Dallas is losing 1-0.
That's the surprising result in the first. But maybe if you look at the way FC Dallas finished the season last year, that they're continuing it, and it's a bit of that's a surprising team and a hard team to handicap heading into the season. I haven't wrapped my head around them last season right yet. I'll have to do some research this week. But
I still have cross country skiing in my mind. I'm like, Alex Army, come on, man, damn Russians. Club America. Deportivo Saprissa, Duane. 5-1 on aggregate for the Club America, one of the biggest club in the Americas, basically, especially Mexico. This club from Mexico City tonight. It will be in Estadio Azteca. It's 5-1 Club America. Even though Saprissa is considered one of the biggest Costa Rican club teams, they're not as good as they were maybe a few years ago, and Club America is going to get the job done tonight quite easily, I think.
Well, 5-1, and we saw firsthand how powerful Club America could be, and the big O there a few years ago. That was a long time ago now, wasn't it? 4 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's 3 years. It's getting on 4. But I feel for Club America tonight, we'll see players in the hundreds. That's when you know you got the thing wrapped up, when making his debut for the club, number 128. number 128. Like, what? Players can wear number in hundreds? Yes, they can. And the last two games of the round of 16 in the CONCACAF Champions League, New York Red Bulls against Olympia. It's 1-1 on aggregate, playing at Red Bull Arena tonight. And the Seattle Sounders versus Santa Tecla. Sounders are down 2-1 heading into tonight's game at the Clink. And Jordan Morris is out for the season. That's quite a terrible news for Sounders fan.
Yeah, look, I have a feeling that the Sounders might have a slip back this season. I'm basing that on the fact that the last I saw them, they played so terrible in front of me. But I just think that Dempsey's getting on, and they really don't have an answer to change that. And yeah, I have a feeling that I've been having a feeling Seattle might have to slip back for the last couple of years, and they made the MLS Cup final 2 years in a row. So what do I know what I'm talking about anyway?
So what do we know? What the bleep do we know? So those are the games tonight and tomorrow. And when I look at TFC, Duane, we mentioned a lot about depth. We mentioned there was a conversation yesterday on Twitter with Matthew Doyle and other pundits and other just fans talking about TFC and the best thing in history and Raheem Edwards leaving, and is TFC the same team this year without him, and how was his influence, yes and no. And it's not really like a discussion I want to get into now, but I'm just saying TFC, with the moves they made in the offseason, we can't say they're worse for sure. Can we say they're better though?
They're on paper better. The two players they added are of a different class. I mean, they've essentially they've got the 3 DPs, and I would argue there's 3 TAM level players on that team. So you have 6 players out of 11 that are above the salary cap in the range, and that's because they can afford it.
Agekse, right? The player Agekse that was signed earlier this week, last week, and the Belgian player as well, and Vasquez are the 3 TAM players that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And look, as we say, and I don't know, we had a lot of attention on the Olympics the last 2 weeks, so TFC's kind of taken a back channel. But when you look at the moves it made, are they better? No, you don't know what chemistry can work out, and maybe that's what you're talking about. Matt Doyle's weird tweet about Raheem Edwards being the only reason they won the Canadian Championship last year, and he did have a big pass in that game, but that was a bit of a strange take, because as much as Raheem had a great start to the season, he mattered a lot to that team, and we were all disappointed here in Toronto to see him go, but happy for, logically, I'm happy that he's going to get more playing time, I think, because he really didn't contribute much from about July on, right? I mean, I don't know what his exact minutes were, but he went from, a regular starter to probably less than a couple hundred minutes the rest of the way, and so it's hard to really say that he had much influence on the championship at the end, other than that depth. I think what he had, yes, he contributed to the Canadian Championship a great deal, and the Canadian Championship's a weird one because you have to play the Canadians in it now, right? And that's going to be a challenge for them. I mean, you'll likely see Ashton Morgan in that competition, and that's, if they're going to lose one this year, I would put them right now. I haven't done the hard research on it, but my initial impression is that I probably will be picking them to win MLS Cup again, just because of the talent level. That's not to say it's going to be easy, but I still think they're the best team.
Yeah, it kind of does make sense when you think about it, that of course they are a favorite. All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue to talk about soccer.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
I missed the music. I missed our music. I was sick and tired of the K-pop. Geez, I couldn't stand K-pop anymore. All right, now, Duane, speaking of pop and popular and decisions, an announcement. Yesterday, the Canadian men's national team announced that Mauro Biello, former Montreal Impact head coach, will be an assistant to John Herdman. And that news was taken very, very well in Montreal, very well across the country, and as well as being an assistant to John Herdman, Mauro Biello will be director of the Excel U23 program, Duane.
Yeah, look, and Biello, I think he got a bit of a raw deal at the end in Montreal. I mean, they didn't perform for sure last year, but was that his fault? No, I don't necessarily think so. There was, I think, talent deficits at times. I think they were a little too old, and you might agree with that. When we preview the Impact later this week, we'll talk more in detail about that. But I certainly think that there's talent there, and we'd like to see him succeed. The Excel program situation, the only concern really I have with that is that I'm not convinced by the Excel program idea itself, and I'm not alone in that feeling. There's a lot of people on the women's side of the game that look at it and say, I don't know if this is working as well as they claim. But it's nice to have somebody there that's, good to see Canadians get an opportunity. I guess the question I'd have with Biello is how, what's his experience working with young players. He was managing a very older Impact team. You'd probably know better than me what his reputation is that way. So hopefully,
before being the head coach of Montreal, he was the assistant for ever since they were in Major League Soccer, working with the academy as well, and working with the players that are working with the academy, which is now an actual part of the player pool of Canada. There's about 10 to 15 players at any given time that have come through the academy that are now part of the selection process for Canadian national team. So Mauro Biello being an assistant and knowing those players, it gives some credibility to the program of John Herdman, and it gives some players that, like Balou Tabla, who might be on the fence, or maybe he's chosen Ivory Coast already. We don't know. He's in Barcelona. It's far away now from here. Maybe he's not even thinking about us anymore. But Mauro Biello has a history with Balou Tabla. So if there's ever a possibility of convincing a Jean-Yves Balou Tabla, even though I don't think it's possible, if it is possible, Mauro Biello is the man to do so. And on top of it, you have the knowing of the Quebec region, and naming Mauro Biello to the Canadian men's national team does give the Canadian men's national team more influence in the province of Quebec. And when I mean influence is, next time they'll come around, tickets will be selling a bit more easily, and people will talk about it. People in the mainstream media world of French television will be talking about our national team a little bit more.
Yeah, well, no, there's a couple things here that you look, taking Biello aside and just look at the idea of Biello. And obviously it's good that they're going to have an under-23 program that's ongoing for the Olympic qualifying, because I maintain that Olympic qualifying is an important thing. Can't believe I'm saying Olympic again when we capture, but anyway.
And it came out it really came out organically. Like you were not even thinking of, you were really focusing on soccer, and you still said Olympics.
And I still got Olympics on the brain. I got the 5 rings on the brain. And the other part is, you just nailed it there. There has been an idea, a belief in Quebec that maybe the Quebec players have been overlooked consistently in the past. Certainly, if you look at rosters, generally speaking, you'll have 7 BC kids, 7 Ontario kids, and 3 Montreal kids, right? And that's maybe that ratio needs to change a little bit. Maybe they need to look at that talent pool a little bit more. And there's one of the great criticisms of the Canadian men over the years is that and the women too for that matter, is that they don't necessarily look deep enough into the talent when they're naming national teams. And certainly the president of the CSA was a Quebecer for a long time, but on a national team level, there has been, I can't remember. I don't think there's ever been anyone this associated with them that's francophone. I know Biello's, he's anglophone, isn't he?
He's anglophone, and he speaks Italian, of course, and a bit of Spanish too. He speaks multiple languages, but you're right. It's rare that we see higher in the coaching pyramid of Canadian national team players or personnel from Quebec. I was surprised yesterday. I don't know about you. Colin Miller was someone that I expected to be named there. It might still be named there in the next few days, but to have Mauro Biello, I think it shows a commitment from the CSA, at least on the national team side, to not overlook Quebec anymore. Maybe make sure that the perception is better, at least.
Well, okay, the John Herdman thing, I still, obviously, all of us have a lot of questions about how this is going to work out on a pure day-to-day managerial standpoint. But what is positive, and I think what everyone recognizes that Herdman does well, is he does create infrastructure. He creates scouting networks that are pretty exclusive, and he did do a good job at finding young players that he was able to integrate with the national team program. So I didn't have any worry about that, and this seems to be an indication that he's going to continue that on the men's side, and he's going to try and create that infrastructure. That's partly why I sort of felt that he might have been a better technical director hire than he would have necessarily been a manager hire, but, it is what it is. Certainly if you're, the one area that I still have hope for is that maybe he does sort of take that overview standpoint. He is a manager, but he brings someone else into that program that can command greater respect to the room more instantaneously, someone who's played at a higher level, that's managed at a higher level. And Biello, he played at the USL level. He's managed, obviously, in MLS. That might command a little more respect than he would initially, and that's maybe unfair, but it could also be true, right? So
he made it to the Eastern Conference of MLS, not just managed too. That has a component to it too. Is he had success in Major League Soccer as a head coach? So even though he didn't win anything, he made it to the Eastern Conference Final 2 years ago, right?
Yes,
so you do have that.
How did that one end again?
Yeah, whatever. Fine. You don't have to. You won already. Leave me alone. Just leave me alone.
Okay. Yes, they came within 30 minutes of a Nick Hagelin header from being in the MLS
Nick.
Cup final, for sure.
Nick, good luck. By the way, Nick Hagelin, congratulations. His wife is pregnant. Hopefully, everything goes well in the next few months. Congratulations on Nick Hagelin. But now, moving on to other Canadian men's national team news. Yes, we've talked about it, but now we've seen John Herdman hire Mauro Biello. There's if you listen to Antonito Terra, he's expecting Colin Miller to be named as well, probably an assistant or someone working with John Herdman. So that's two assistant of high level when you look at Canadian men's national team's history of coaching staff. So
yeah, Colin Miller has a long history with the national team. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking at competent hiring by John Herdman so far. The way he's surrounding himself, and maybe that's the one thing we overlooked when we talked about this situation. Maybe he didn't give enough credentials to that. Is how he surrounds himself, and maybe he knows. Like maybe you mentioned technical director role. Well, that's kind of what he's doing. And when you're a head coach of a national team, the managing aspect of matches is just a small portion of your actual task. So him surrounding himself correctly to make sure that is taken care of, and surrounding himself with people that will build bridges with association in different provinces in this country, make sure that a relationship between the provincial level and the national level is a bit more mainstream and a bit more easier to mainstream talent, and to an equal level to representation that everyone feel included. So when you travel the country and you sell tickets to play friendlies, you make money and you can use that money to fund the program even more. So it's kind of like that wheel that I see start spinning now, and I'm hopeful. I don't know about you, and we haven't seen him manage a game yet, and that's one aspect we can't really talk about until we see. But the way he's surrounding himself got me a bit hopeful.
Well, you got to have some hope. I mean, otherwise you'll go insane.
It's Canadian soccer after all.
Yeah, 30 years and we're still here. 35 years and we're still here. This is you're right. It is good. And what I do like about this, when you look at the last two guys in, you look at Cloro and Oz, the assistants they hired were sort of their guys. You know what I mean? Like they weren't necessarily coming from outside of the influence of the head coach himself. So in this particular case, he's surrounding himself by people that might challenge him, that might not necessarily be like lockstep with them. And that's, I think, a good thing when you're looking at a national team program. I think you should have internal debates, and you should not just rely on the same old thing, because you can get into groupthink. If you have the same people around you all the time, then at some point, especially when you're moving into a new challenge like this, you might get stuck in a single way of thinking. Say, oh, this worked with the women. Oh, so it's going to obviously work with the men. Well, that won't necessarily be the case. So maybe having a guy that's coached, managed MLS, say, you know what, this particular aspect, this particular thing you're doing might not fly. So maybe we want to think about it this way, and that's a positive thing.
Well, to say it bluntly, what I really meant too is he's not surrounding himself with yes men, right? Am I saying Flora and Oz were? Maybe. But at least right now, it doesn't seem like he is, which is good because he's putting himself outside of his comfort zone, right? He's already outside of his comfort zone, coaching men in a national team level, at a higher level that he has coached in the last few years. Not saying that the men's are higher than the women, just saying it's a different type of environment. And I'm sorry if I used the word higher in this way. That's not what I meant. I just meant in a level of coaching and the level of expectations, and the margin of error is maybe a little smaller. So to get accustomed to this, he makes sure that he's surrounded with the right personnel, and it is a good move. And maybe that's the pitch that sold the CSA on Jordan Herman. Who knows? But at least we're going in the right direction, and you can get your tickets to be in the Wordjust section for the friendly against New Zealand, which will be John Herdman's first game at the helm of the national team.
You have to get a plane ticket too, but yes, that would be something. Anyway, yes, we all you gotta have is hope. I mean, that's the story of Canadian soccer, is hoping against hope. That's depressing, but
yeah,
right. It wasn't. We didn't have to have a hope on, Kevin, was the Olympic performance of Canada this time. And we'll be reviewing that on Thursday.
Thursday, Five Rings Weekly comes back. Patreon.com/sportspodcast network for your support. We are working on a new project, and if you have been following us for a few years, you'll remember a certain show that we used to do talking about Canadian soccer. A version of that show might be coming back, and will be available to you on patreon.com/sportspodcast network. Make sure you take the pledge now, so when the Solitudes meets again, you'll be there to support us.
There you go. Might even talk about something that I talk about a lot. All right.
Exactly. All right, Duane, before we wrap up today, I want to mention a happy birthday to the Ottawa Fury. 5 years yesterday was the birth of the branding of the Fury and the birth of the first professional soccer club in Ottawa's, not the first in history, but the first in a long time.
Yes, and I was fortunate enough to be at the Fury's first ever game at that little stadium at Carlson. It's a great crowd, a great atmosphere back then. Good bunch of people supporting that team. Always have a soft spot for the Fury, and let's hope for many, many more years from Ottawa. We'd like to have the game in the national capital for sure.
And speaking of Ottawa, their first game ever was in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, at the home of the Strikers, and now that home looks terrible. If you have been on social media yesterday, there was a tweet by former Strikers player Oli Hassan, and you can see this pitch has run down. It's been a year now since it's been closed, and it's in a terrible state. There's trees, bushes, animal living on the pitch. There's the entire stadium looks terrible. It's in terrible shape. There's been some looting. There's things that have been broken down. This is an embarrassment. It's terrible to see this. It's terrible to just still see the logo of the Strikers and the NASL and then things dangling from it. It got me sad, and I hate to see soccer infrastructure in that state.
It's a little symbolic too when you think about the current state of the NASL, but obviously something needs to change on that front, but you don't want it to go away completely. I know some people do out there, but I think that we got to look at the players and the loss of the opportunity for North American soccer players to play professionally if you lose those teams. So hopefully something can get worked out. I think Fort Lauderdale is pretty much done now. There's a lot of teams in that area. Maybe, it's natural selection a little bit here, but unfortunate because it was a grand old name in the game, and seems like it's probably dead for good now.
Yeah, exactly. All right. As always, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. You can follow the show at Soccer Today SPN. We're like 2 away from 1,000. How about you give us a follow? And as always, until tomorrow, we're available live every day at 10 a.m. on youtube.com/sportspodcast network. You can take the pledge at patreon.com/sportspodcast network and help support independent soccer journalism. There's not a lot left. We're just a few, but make sure we're one of the ones left standing. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.